one of my favorite holidays because it brings so many people together, and we try out things that we haven't tried before in the kitchen, and also have a chance to revisit favorites. And these Passover rolls are always part of what we do. One of the things that most of you know about Passover is, and as Pam said, we don't use flour. We don't use anything that's been leavened. So Jewish cooks over the years have tried to figure out how to make a flat and basically not very tasty matzah into something that's delicious and sometimes fluffy, hence matzah balls. And these Passover rolls are another way that Jewish cooks have figured out a way to, create something really delicious that isn't going to crumble when you make a sandwich, and will hold jelly or chopped liver or brisket, and be just a nice way to complement your meals. So without further ado, I'll start the recipe. Just a reminder, turn your ovens to 450 if they aren't there yet. And be sure while I'm talking to grease a cookie sheet, because we'll need a greased cookie sheet in just a couple of minutes. So let me start with the ingredients. First, there's matzah meal, and it's kosher for Passover. It's got a little hechsher on it. You'll see the OU and the P. It tells you that it's kosher for Passover and Parv. So we have the matzah meal. And we have salt, and I use kosher for Passover salt. I'm not sure what makes it kosher for Passover, but it is. And but any salt will work. Water, which we all know about. We've got oil, just 1/3 of a cup, and then 4 eggs, which we're gonna crack one at a time into the pan. So I'll get started over here, and the first step is to mix the oil and water together in the pan, and bring it to a boil. So turn on your oil and water. It's gonna boil quickly.
Mark, what kind of oil are you?
I use canola oil. But you can use cottonseed oil. You can use olive oil. I like a neutral oil that isn't gonna overwhelm the taste of the Passover rolls. But any kind of oil will do. One thing while we're waiting for the oil and water to boil, we all have some Passover traditions. We live in University City, right in the heart of the Orthodox community. And one of the traditions that we enjoy observing is when people come to a parking lot across the street from our house right before Passover and burn their hummus. So there's a bonfire a day or so before Passover every year as Jews in the neighborhood come together. They've gotten rid of all of the flour and other things that might be leavened. And I think we have a survey about some Passover traditions that we wanted you to participate in. If you have a favorite Passover tradition. So
while I'm filling out the survey, Mark, there's a couple of questions in the chat box. And
sure.
Is there a certain amount of water you use? Are you boiling just 1 cup water? Is that how much, or?
Yes, 1 cup water, 1/3 cup of oil. And also, if you want to double the recipe to make twice as many rolls, that works too.
And how many rolls are you going to make?
About a dozen.
Okay, I am going to upload the recipe, everybody, in the chat box. So in case you don't have the recipe handy, I'll put it up there so you can look at it too if you have any additional recipe questions.
Amy, it only allows you to choose one of the Passover traditions. Can you change
Ah,
that?
good point. Let me see if I can. I don't know if I can. How about pick your favorite? How about pick your favorite? I think I can, but I'd have to go back to a different document, and I don't think I want to risk it.
Are there any other questions, Amy?
Somebody asked, does parchment paper work as well as grease to line the cookie sheet?
I'm sure it would. I've never used it, but for sure, that ought to work just fine.
I use it regularly, and yes, it does work well.
Okay, perfect.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, I'm working on getting up the recipe.
One of our other Passover traditions, which we recently abandoned, was soaking all the glassware that we were going to use during Passover for 3 days. And we would change the water every day and let the glasses soak. It really cleaned the glasses well. A convenient place to do that is in your bathtub if you ever want to try that. Oh, my sous chef tells me it's boiling, so I'm gonna go back to cooking. And the next step is to gradually mix your matzo meal into your boiling water and oil. And you got to do it gradually so it doesn't clump. And it'll start thickening. And as soon as it's all in there, and you've got your dough not sticking to the sides of the pan, but instead being a big lump of dough in the middle, take it off of the burner, take it off the heat, and just stir it a little bit more for a moment or two. So it's all incorporated, all the matzo meal is incorporated.
Can you hold your pan in front of the camera so we can see the
I
inside?
sure can. It looks
Open a
like,
little bit more.
see what it looks like? It kind of becomes a lump.
There you go.
Mark, can you tip it a little bit more? Tip it a
Oh, wait,
little more. Not your camera, but your pan. Yeah.
There you go.
Ah, there you go.
Like really tip your pan. There you go. It looks like mashed potatoes, sort of.
Yeah, there you go. Mashed potatoes. Okay, so it's kind of clumping together. And then the next step is really pretty easy. And that's just take a tablespoon, or I just use the wooden spoon that I've been stirring with, and make some little rolls on your greased cookie sheet.
How are you putting your eggs in?
I was
Oh,
just gonna ask that.
good point. Thank you. Boy, this is the first time I've ever done this with an audience, so thank you very much for that.
Do you add salt too?
Oh, that would not have been good. So yeah, you break the eggs one at a time, and you put it in, and you mix the eggs, but just one at a time. You mix the eggs into the dough. Get them all incorporated in there. But again, it's just one egg at a time, and it starts to make the dough pull together better.
Mark, can you tell us why you do it the way that you do it, first in a glass and then you put it in the pan? I thought that was interesting when you told me that.
Yeah, I think it's also part of our dietary rules, part of kashrut, the dietary tradition. We want to make sure that we're that if we're going to be cooking with an egg, that it hasn't been fertilized, that there isn't a little chicken growing inside that egg, because that would be, a violation of our dietary rules. The little, even it was just a little teeny speck. It was a life. It was becoming a life. And while we were eating we would eat chicken and we would eat eggs, and but we only did it in a very thoughtful way. And that's really part of our tradition as Jews. It goes way back to even before Abraham. I think the lesson came from Noah, from the real early Jewish traditions, that when we're getting nourishment from animals, we can do that. We don't all have to be vegetarians, but we're going to do it in a way that's thoughtful, that we're being mindful. So when we,
if I could add one thing, when I bake challah with the challah bakers at CRC, it's also that in case you get a little bit of shell by mistake in the cup, you just can take it out and it doesn't end up in your dough.
there's that too. Thank you.
Mark, can you tip your pan so we can see
Sure.
what it looks like?
There we go.
Thank you.
There we go. So it's going to take a minute or two, but just keep stirring. It'll get there. All the eggs and all the matzah meal will just become a single bit of dough. And whoever it was that reminded me about the eggs, boy howdy, thank you for that.
Mark, did you also add a salt yet?
I did add the salt. I put the salt in before I added the matzah meal. I put the salt in the matzah meal, so it's all already in there.
Oh, okay. I think so. Probably our folks may not have known to do that. So make sure that you add.
Yeah, just put a little bit of salt. I think it's half a teaspoon of salt. So just a little bit of salt. Put some salt in here while we're doing this. So if our dough's looking like that, we'll get out a tablespoon and start putting the dough back on the cookie sheet. And we're gonna make, little lumps of dough that are about, I don't know, about 2 inches around. And they don't have to be exact. They're not all going to be exactly the same. Kind of like snowflakes or something. They're going to have a little individuality. And if you have a little extra dough at the end, you can adjust the size, put a little more dough on one of that's a little smaller.
As wonderful as it is to have.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Oh, hello? Yeah.
Hello, I was hearing.
There,
Yeah.
there are those of us who sometimes, depending on the occasion, want the rolls to really be the same exact size.
Okay.
Depending on the size of your eggs, I just want to comment that you can add a teeny bit more matzah meal to thicken your batter if you need to. I have in the past sometimes put some oil on my hands and rolled them. So you can use a cookie scoop so that they are the same size if you choose to, sometimes I'm just accidentally a little bit, have trouble being organic like that, but you can roll them though they are the same size, and you can plop them into a cupcake or muffin tin as well.
Oh,
so there are
wow.
just some variations, and I just wanted to share that at this point.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Muffin tin. So again, the oven has been preheated to 450. And we're gonna put it in the oven. And we're gonna set our timers
Wait.
for 15 minutes. So that's
Amy, you're
awesome.
on mute. Amy, you're
Critical
on mute.
step. So at a 450 oven for 15 minutes. So does anybody have any questions at this point? You can put them in the chat, and Amy will check and
Mark,
see,
I wonder if, I hate to ask you to do this, but I was on mute when I did.
Okay,
Take the tray and just show us what they look like before they went in the oven.
sure.
I think you'll all be amazed at how simple this is, and the beautiful word Pam used is organic.
Right. But anyway, they're, when they come out, they really will look like popovers and not like little lumps. But again, 15 minutes in the oven at 450, and then we'll adjust the temperature down to 325 for another 30 to 35 minutes. So that's really about it for popovers. And I'm gonna move real quickly now to the orange honey butter, and want to acknowledge that this is Pam's recipe. Pam contributed this because the honey butter, the orange honey butter, is so good on these Passover rolls. So I hope everybody's took their butter out ahead of time, so it's room temperature, and I'm gonna get started with that. So again, the ingredients are butter, naturally, and I'm going to use 2 sticks because I think that's going to be plenty of butter for me and David. Half the recipe. I squeezed a quarter of an orange juice. I have a little orange zest. If you've got a zester, it's easy to do that. And finally, and I think most important for honey butter is the honey. So I'm gonna add these all to my blender.
Mark, can you give us the specific amount of each thing that you've measured? Hold on, Mark, you're muted. Hang on, you're muted.
Unmute. Okay, here I am. So the ingredients are, and I think we've shared the recipe, is 4 sticks of butter, the zest from 1 orange, the juice of half of an orange, and 4 tablespoons of raw honey. So I just cut it all in half, 2 sticks of butter, 1 orange, half of an orange's zest, about a quarter of an orange's juice, and 2 tablespoons of raw honey, and I'll use a quarter of a tablespoon of the kosher salt, and I'm using sweet butter. So
As an
orange.
alternative, in case if you don't have a fresh orange in the house, you can also put in alternatively, which would be equally yummy, some marmalade, like some jam.
Ooh,
Butter.
that does sound good.
For that matter, you could kind of play with this recipe and make a strawberry butter or a raspberry, you can really have fun with it.
Well, this is something I've never done, so I'm kind of excited to be trying this out for a first time. Just a little bit of salt. I'm not one of those cooks that measures all. I'm more of a cook than a baker. I like it. So, as a blend,
So Mark or Pam, can if you don't have a blender like this, can you just do this with, you just mash it with a fork or a spoon?
Of course, of course. And alternatively, other variations, if you don't have honey or choose not to use honey, you can use confection sugar to sweeten it and blend it in there. When you are using fresh juice as opposed to the jam, just because of the consistency, I would just kind of splash it in a little at a time. You may not, you may just, you don't want to make it too loose. So I would just splash in as a last ingredient, the juice a little at a time. And when you kind of have the consistency that looks like it's gonna hold together, then I would just stop from there. It's a little bit one of those recipes where you just kind of, there's no true, as much honey as you want or as sweet as you want it. But yeah, and it freezes really well. If you want to make little balls, with a melon baller, and you can freeze them.
well, I'm gonna be putting this in the in a nice big dish, and I'll share what the final product is when I bring the rolls out of the oven. I will be reminding people we got about 8 more minutes to adjust the temperature of the oven, but I suggest that we pass this to Alisa for the Matzo Brei.
Excellent. Just sitting my survey here.
Wait, before we do that, sorry, my dog is barking. I'm going to launch a poll for what you like to have on your popovers. Curious to hear what some of the favorites are here. And also, let's just take a moment before we go to Alisa. And if anybody else has any other variations of some kind of a delicious butter they want to tell us about, please unmute and just tell us, just like Pam was doing. It's really fun for us to be able to learn from each other.
Chicken. I like chicken.
With chicken?
Chicken.
Chicken on your popovers?
Yes.
Oh, yum. Delicious. All right, go ahead, and if you haven't answered the poll, answer the poll. I'm going to launch the results. All right, here we go. So it looks like orange honey butter is sounds like the winner here. Nobody's putting green eggs and ham on theirs. I'm shocked. And Mark, no one is going to have an elephant. Oh no, there is someone who's going to have an elephant on their popover. And of course, Bubby's brisket.
Yes.
Of course. Okay. Oh wait, here, I guess I hadn't shared with all of you. So here are the results. So you can enjoy this. And we are going to move over to Alisa. And Alisa's gonna share with us her Alisa, I'm gonna let you give the title because it's a beautiful title of Matzo Brei. So here we go.
Well, when Amy approached me about doing this class, I needed to really punch up the title just for my own amusement and inspiration, right? So, we went with the Matzo Brei variations, a symphony in matzah. We're really, elevating what is effectively scrambled eggs and cracker. I don't want to overpromise, but it's going to be excellent. So, Amy had asked that I, explicate quite a bit along the way. And I wanted to say hi again to everyone and thanks for being here. I came to St. Louis and CRC almost 7 years ago from Pittsburgh. And I was not raised Jewish. I came to Judaism with my introduction into my husband's beautiful family. And I approached the religion, not just through the synagogue, but through food. And maybe that's a way, no matter what our backgrounds, that all of us continue to access our Judaism. And, you know, raising my son in a Jewish household has been delightful, and bringing these, you know, dishes to the table for the holidays has been incredibly special. So my first encounter with Matzo Brei was my stepfather-in-law, Elaine's fabulous husband. Elaine Spector is on the call today, my mother-in-law. And, you know, this is Howard I'm talking about, and he, you know, is not a man who picks up a spatula with great joy, but he was really pleased to show me kind of the ratio of egg and milk to matzah as he broke the pieces into the bowl. And I understood that this was a very long time tradition and something that he could do intuitively and had been doing intuitively since he was probably a young guy. So I've also been excited to see like the variations that are possible. And some of the things that have inspired me and how I set up the recipes for today include a book by Michael Rollman called Ratio. It is a really fun book. I don't know if you approach, you know, cooking as a science per se, but I felt like this is a good underpinning for learning what brokers a good baked recipe in particular, right? And what components are variable and flexible. How do you look for, and you know, of course, this is more about baking and leavening and how you find that in your different ratios, but just the idea behind it, and bringing that to this set of recipes for the wet and dry components. And then another favorite cookbook that inspires me is this one called A New Way to Cook. It was out, I think, in the late 90s. It's by Sally Schneider, who I think is just a genius cook. And this is all about bringing a lot of flavor to your recipes without bringing a lot of fat. And so it taps a lot of traditions. And at the end of each recipe, it will have an extra paragraph called Variations, in which she offers substitutes for, you know, ingredients from the primary recipe, and allows you to kind of start to take it into your own realm, which is great because, as we know, ingredients can be hard to find certain times of year. And maybe there's some regional preferences, you know, that we would rather insert into ours. So with that in mind, I have also a kind of a full disclosure note. This is a good time to reapproach your huge jar of crystallized honey from Rosh Hashanah, which is what I found in the cupboard when I went to prepare for this, and I decided, no, we're gonna reuse that. We are not dumping that crystallized honey. So while Mark has been cooking, I've had my jar of honey in kind of a warm water bath, just barely simmering, kind of breaking down those crystals so that we can use it here. And also, I did do kind of an ahead step of putting some hot, kind of barely boiling, just, you know, kind of like steaming hot water over my half cup of golden raisins, just so that they're ready to drain and put in later. So I don't know how many of you are cooking along, but that's a good ahead step for next time. And then Amy also said, you know, talk about your ingredients, get into it. So looking at the stuff on our list, probably everyone has like a go-to matzah. This is not mine. I like Strites. It's probably more about the packaging, you know, than anything else. They're probably all very similar, but this is what you could get for, you know, 4 boxes for $8 at, you know, the market when I was there at Schnucks. You guys like me probably find that the Schnucks over by Ladue is really well stocked with stuff. The Schnucks in Crestwood, for example, has scarcely heard of Judaism. So, pick your store and you're going to end up with what they have. But this is as good as anything. And you can see that it has the mark that it's kosher for Passover. And it also falls into that parv category where it can kind of go any direction, right? You have your meat and your dairy and your parv, as you all know. And for Matzo Brei, the eggs are in the parv category, but if you go butter, that's dairy. So consider who your audience is, who you're cooking for. If it's a more, conservative member of the family, you might want to, kind of go on the more conservative side. And, even though this can be often going towards sweet and dairy, if you're wanting to take it towards smoked salmon or anything like that, if you're wanting to add, lox later, then you might want to go with oil and not just have it be about.
Yeah, excuse me. It's time to adjust the temperature of your oven to 325. So if you're cooking along, this is the time to lower the oven temperature. Excuse me, Lisa.
Alisa, Alisa, you need to unmute.
It must have automatically muted me okay, great, thanks. So let's just dive right in. And today we'll just be doing the sweet honey quark Matzo Brei. And to launch ourselves with that, I already put 4 eggs into the bowl. Just to get a little head start. It's nice, of course, if they're room temperature, but it's not a killer if they're not. So salt and pepper, I use kosher salt just as a matter of course, not so that I'm prepared to be kosher at the drop of a hat, but really just because I prefer its texture and its coarseness. I use it even in baking with really good results. I would, maybe at this point, just do like 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon. You can always add more later in the process, but you can't take it away, right? And maybe just a little twist of pepper, ground pepper. A whisk is great, but usually when I'm doing eggs, I just use a regular old fork. I feel like leaving a little ropiness to the eggs is desirable, maintaining a little structure. They're not a whipped texture or consistency for this. Now, we're not very far in and we're already courting controversy here as we, move toward the matzah because, this is going to take 4 sheets. And I know people have really different traditions, whether they soak their pieces first in hot water, whether they run them under the kitchen tap, or whether they add maybe something richer like milk to the mix, like my father-in-law does. So I know that this might not be relevant for all of us here, but I do know that there's kind of more of a minority of Jews that would follow the idea of gebro, that unleavened matzah products that become wet are something they would not eat. So that would include, matzah balls and so on. And so even, soaking the matzah in water would be, going too far. This recipe doesn't address that directly, but it doesn't call for any additional moisture because we're going to be adding, dairy and honey later on. So this is a perfect move for okay, I'm sorry. Now this is time to add the honey, half of the quark and the cinnamon. So the honey quantity is, fully half a cup. Mine is kind of hot right now, which is not ideal, but at least it's going to act a little bit more like honey and be pourable. So I'm going to let it cool off a little bit as I get the other things in. I'll just measure out my half cup. And I thought we could do a little experiment with the dairy element. I've always wondered a little bit, quark is not always readily available. It's kind of more of a byproduct of the cheese making process. And I've seen it appear more like kind of a drier curd, you know? This one that I picked up at Whole Foods the other night is really quite creamy in appearance. So I have these adorable little dessert spoons my brother got me. So I thought we could do a little taste test of some of these. So I would describe quark as being tangy, but kind of like roundly tangy, like sort of like a tangy cottage cheese. It has very much of a cottage cheese vibe to it.
Does it have the consistency of like a sour cream or a yogurt?
This one does, but normally I've seen it more of a drier curd where it's almost like little pieces. Yeah, which I couldn't know until I opened.
You've seen it like a crumbled feta almost?
Yeah, exactly. But definitely not as sharp or tangy as a feta. You know how a little bit of cottage cheese can be so good in scrambled eggs. You know, this feels like that, like it's kind of a soothing, rounded, soft dairy taste, but just a little tang to it. I thought I could also, you know, just kind of side by side, see how different it is from, sorry, that was the same one, from mascarpone. Just because who doesn't want a thing of mascarpone left after her cooking class, right? So this is way blander and a much fattier taste. I think you wouldn't go wrong with this, but you might want to, I don't know, add a pinch of sugar even to it. It's just a little too bland, I think. This is a really rich dish. And so I think you don't want all of the ingredients tending toward like sweeter and heavier. I think some of the balance of like maybe a slightly more bitter chocolate, maybe a slightly tangier cheese would help, you know, just kind of give a fuller, you know, symphony, if you will, of flavors. So then just a plain whipped cream cheese. Actually, cream cheese feels a little closer to the quark than mascarpone does. And frankly, maybe even like a mix of cream cheese and sour cream or creme fraiche, which I don't have here to taste test, would be closest. So none of these, I did notice that like the butter from Whole Foods is a kosher dairy product, but these other products are not. And so, well, the whipped cream cheese is, but these other products were not. So if that's important to you, definitely kind of keep an eye on that. And I think you could definitely source like a comparable substitution, just eye on the tang, right? Okay, so I'm gonna plunge ahead with putting my slightly too hot honey into here. Maybe I'll go with the quark first. Like Mark, I've become a little bit more of an eyeballer, and I kind of approve of that for this, this notion of learning to play with these ingredients, right? You want to have a little confidence with them. So exactitude is not necessarily the order of the day. I'm enjoying these notes about where people are finding quark. Okay, so we've got the molten honey, we've got the kind of runnier quark, but that's okay. This is all going to be cooked. And then the quantity of cinnamon, which is a teaspoon. This one also is from Whole Foods. I don't know about you guys. I love shopping at Penzies for spices. I often get things from there. Okay, so we've got we're going to tap some in later, so I'll just keep that open. We've got our eggs.
Every once in a while, can you show us what's in your bowl? It's a little out of our.
Yeah, well, with the cinnamon, it's, you know, taken on a whole new flavor, right? There you go. Thanks, Amy. Okay, so we really have a much more liquidy appearance here than we did when it was just the eggs. So I think even Howard would approve. So now that we're, you know, gonna break our matzah, this is kind of a good moment. If you've got a kid in the house, pull up a chair. Again, there is not a science to doing this. I sort of do things quickly and kind of impatiently and too many things at the same time. So for me, it really becomes just a, you know, taking it in sections and just, you know, breaking it in my hand. And so it's coming in very unevenly of different sizes. There's a cook I really admired named Judy Rogers, who's at Zuni Cafe in San Francisco. And there's a wonderful Zuni Cafe cookbook. And one of the things she always says is that it's good to vary the size of things, because then you have some that are slightly more charred bits and some that are slightly softer, and that textural variation is really pleasing. So it's not like a Martha Stewart moment where we're trying to figure out how to cut these in exact 1-inch squares or anything. We're just kind of crumbling away. So yep, great kid job, great task for someone with a Bloody Mary in their hand. Just, you know, or be like me and just do it fast. I feel like I'm adding, you know, crackers to chowder or something. I mean, they've just, you know, it's got this slightly toasty smell to it. And you could really do this with a lot of different kinds of matzah too. I really like, you know, tea matzahs. Whole wheat ones don't break down quite as much, but they're really good too. They do say don't use an egg one, that's just, I don't know, gilding the lily, or just, you know, don't hold up quite as well, I think is what it is. They don't have the same consistency. Okay, so we're gonna let this get tossed around. I mean, at this moment, there's like flotsam of matzah on top of the egg mixture. We're gonna just kind of make sure it all gets wet evenly. I need a camera tech. Here we go. All right, and while we let this sit and soak just 1 to 2 minutes, it's a good time to heat your pan. Do just over medium heat. If you have a gas range or one that you can control, so much the better. I'm going to use butter for this recipe. We already have a dairy orientation, plus it's you know, a sweeter mix, so an unsalted butter. I know, and it just says the butter. Let's see. Let's just go with like, oh yeah, 2 tablespoons. That seems like a lot to me. I don't know about you guys, but I usually cut butter in half or more when I'm adding it. I don't demonize butter, but I just feel like, being a chocolate lover, I really, you know, want to have like the butter fat calories where they count. And for me, that's chocolate. So I'm just going to go with like a tablespoon-ish of butter.
Can you talk for a minute about your pan that you've chosen today? It's a coated versus a not coated?
It is.
For all of everybody.
Yeah, I really like a ceramic pan. I use that a lot. They clean up reasonably well with eggs. This one is the one I had access to today. It's totally non-stick, and that'll be super easy. It almost feels like cheating. It's so easy. But I also like cast iron. I feel like cast iron would be particularly good if you were doing kind of a slower scramble, you know, over a lower heat. I sort of like, you know, this one being like a medium to high. This non-stick is going to just clean up a lot better, but people might have their preferences. Like whatever's a good general surface for egg scrambles and omelets is going to treat you really well here too. The butter is already starting to sizzle in the pan, melting quickly because of the relatively high heat, which I'm going to keep an eye on. I might feel like it's a little high. And then the egg mixture is going right in there before it starts to brown. We'll just evenly distribute it. Use some kind of plastic spatula that's not going to scratch your pan. Kind of keep it moving. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. I feel like a slower, gentler cook for an egg makes kind of a creamier texture. I also have my eye on my raisins here that have been soaking, and I have a little strainer and bowl nearby so that I'm going to be able to strain off that liquid. Some recipes that I've used, suggest like saving the raisin strained liquid for another use. I have yet to find that use. If anyone has any great ideas for strained raisin liquid, let me know. Otherwise, that could be disposed of. So this is coming along really quickly, and it's smelling delicious, like especially the cinnamon. A teaspoon is quite a lot of cinnamon for a dish this size, and it really is coming through. Kind of that butter cinnamon, definitely kind of getting a breakfast, brunch, desserty brunch kind of vibe here. I'm going to keep it moving around because those pieces of matzah are so irregular, and you really want the egg to cook evenly. I know that some people do this a little bit more omelet-like and let things set. I'm definitely a move it and keep sort of flipping it over evenly and stirring it as I go. So the other items are going to be added, after it's plated. And so I'm kind of looking for, when it loses a wet look, but it might still have a tiny bit of sheen to it. We're not trying to dry it out entirely, but we are almost there. And I have my plates handy. I'll bring them in a little closer. Okay, so you might be looking at this quantity and thinking, I don't know if it's enough for 4 people, but I'm telling you, I don't know if you've had Matzo Brei before, but it's really filling, and especially with the pork and the honey and the chocolate, like this is definitely a 4-person serving situation. So now that, it definitely looks cooked, but I haven't let all the shine come off the eggs and everything. Like there's still a little moisture, but there's definitely nothing runny about it. And I know it's been turned over really thoroughly a couple times. So the quantity, you end up about like this. And I'll just get all of this off the heat, and then we can move to getting a couple of our toppings ready. I could have pre-chopped the chocolate, in perfect hindsight, that could have been a good thing. And then also at least having pre-soaked the raisins, get some of these things out of the way. We've got that. So I keep one of these in my kitchen. Just gonna strain off these raisins, setting aside the precious strained raisin liquid. But let's talk chocolate because, for some of us, maybe this is just a vehicle for chocolate, yet another vehicle for chocolate. We probably all have our own favorite baking brands. I really love Ghirardelli. I don't know what it is. Like for me, I've just found it a really great baking chocolate. There's also Valrhona and a number of others. So I tend to like something a little bit bittersweet here, like maybe 60, 70%. If you're more inclined toward the sweeter chocolates, I really wouldn't go past like semi-sweet. Again, this is a rich dish, and just that little bit of chocolate is such a treat. You do not have to overdo it. I saw a question about the milk. This particular recipe, because there's so many other kind of wet ingredients, really does not necessitate that. So if you were trying to create like a base sweet recipe, or just had a preference, you know, for the milk and we're doing a dairy oriented dish, you would add the milk to the eggs before you break the matzah into it. Yeah, for this particular one, not needed. So I'll take a couple squares. I'm gonna really finely chop across it. I'll show you what it looks afterward. You can use chips, but I feel like these little shards of shredded chocolate, like you could also grate it, and that would come across well. I just love the presentation of these little fine shards of chocolate. So I'm just gonna chop it in place, just like a diagonal across these bars. And yeah, I think we're gonna want more than 2 squares. I feel strongly that we're not gonna stint on the chocolate. Okay, so I think the chocolate for presentation goes on last, but to get a little bit more melt, let me show you what it looks like first. So you want a really sharp knife for this and just kind of attack it finely at an angle. I don't want you chopping too quickly, so maybe you should do it again as an advanced prep thing. Advanced prep is not my strong suit. So I'm gonna sprinkle a tiny bit on the eggs right now so that it's having a chance to kind of melt in.
Alisa, can you show us the plates one more time?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, here's one that I just started adding a little bit of the chocolate to the top. I think that we'll want to put on like just another drizzly spoonful of the quark. I don't have a huge appetite for dairy in general. I don't know about you. I think this part is to taste. Like you'll want to put the full half cup into the scramble, but what you adorn with on top is just really like your preference. And because it looks pretty. I'll hold one up in a moment here. Okay, so I kind of went for, you know, that sort of approach. Now I'll get some more of the raisins on top. And I'd say go to town with the raisins, right? Because this is a really complementary taste. It's what's adding like a little bit of acidity and is going to heighten the taste of some of the other things. For honey, I'm going to do an additional drizzle.
I'm going to take a moment pause to ask Mark, how are we doing on the popovers, Mark? I think you are muted. Let's make sure Mark, I think you're muted. We have to unmute you.
There we go. Thanks for checking, Amy. We've got about 8 more minutes for the popovers. So thanks for checking in, and I'll interrupt it when I bring the popovers out of the oven in a few minutes. Thanks.
Okay, and Alisa, let's make sure we can still hear you.
Oh, great.
Good. Okay, you're good. We can.
Okay, great. Okay, so, you know, to the finished scramble, we now have a drizzle of quark, a drizzle of honey, a couple spoonfuls of the plumped golden raisins. You know, I tend to find them like this. Most good sized markets will have them. You know, you can certainly use regular raisins as well. This is just kind of what the aesthetically appealing choice here, but like, you know, taste is going to be really similar. And now we've got a slightly, you know, larger sprinkle of chocolate on the top and another little bit of cinnamon. So here's the finished dish. And sometimes like I'm missing like the little sprinkle cover for my cinnamon, but sometimes it's nice if you sprinkle a little wide of the dish. This is a good dish for presentation. I mean, Matzo Brei is not traditionally a thing of glorious beauty. So this one is definitely a little more presentable. It's great, as I was saying, for a brunch or even a dessert, or I don't know, a late night dinner with something nice to drink. But it is delicious, and it's definitely a crowd pleaser. So,
Alisa, another question from the gallery.
yes,
Can you melt the chocolate and drizzle it?
of course. Yes. Yes, I like the little shards of it, but again, it is really to each her own on this one. So definitely go that route. I'm kind of looking, you know, in my research for this, I was really intrigued that some people, some cooks like Joe Nathan go really interesting directions with reducing something sweet like prune juice and using that as their liquid as part of their scramble, and then adding other, you know, fruits or cheese to the tops of it. So you can really make it your own. I mean, I feel like it's pretty limitless. Maybe I should say a couple of things about the savory recipe as well before we cut back over to Mark and the big reveal on the popovers.
Wait, before you do that, I'm going to launch a quick poll.
Okay.
The one we came up with yesterday. How do you like to eat Matzo Brei? And we'll find out what this crowd is, where their inclination is.
Great. I'm just going to sprinkle chocolate while you do that.
So here's the poll. It should be over by your chat box. So we're asking them if they prefer with savory ingredients, with sweet ingredients, or if they've never had it before, or in a box with a fox, which everybody probably would choose that. So, but you can only choose one, I think. So, in a matzo box.
So, I really am hoping that you all will write in some of your favorite variations. We would love to compile them and send that back around. You know, you do see great ones like, you know, red pepper and feta, spinach and feta. You know, these aren't classics, but I think over the last, you know, couple decades, there's probably been, you know, an amalgamation of like other tastes, right, that have come to bear. The ones that I tested, I used the caramelized onion as part of the base of all of them. I was telling Amy, you know, like the dill, just chopped fresh dill on top is so good. Like I've been kind of coming late to dill as like, you know, a spice to, or an herb to dust things with. And oh man, it is really good with this. I also tried some kind of weird things that I had in the fridge, like ginger sriracha sauerkraut. Don't even ask why I have that in my fridge. Anyway, it was really good, but I have to admit, kind of a relief to go back to the onion and dill after checking in on that one. It's probably like a little goes a long way, right? But maybe if you're trying to, I don't know, rope in one of your tougher customers who has very particular tastes, that could be a good way to go.
Alisa, I just want to share these results.
Please.
So you may find it interesting to know. I think our group is a little more familiar with the savory Matzo Brei than the sweet. So it's nice that you were able to introduce us to the sweet. And oh, a good number have never had Matzo Brei before. So that's also really interesting. So hopefully after this week or this Passover, you won't be able to say that anymore.
So Amy, I'm really appreciating the Dr. Seuss undertones to item D or whatever on your polls.
I thought about that.
Yeah, it's at least the second one.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to stop sharing this so you can keep going on your riffs on Matzo Brei.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to have to go to the audience here. You know, obviously like chives are awesome in the savory category. I don't know, I would say experiment because, you know, when I made some the other night, I ended up kind of dividing it into 4 and giving each of the 4 different treatments. And it's not a catastrophe if not every portion gets eaten entirely. I mean, Amy, how do you make Matzo Brei at home, or have you? Are you on mute?
I have never made matzo brei before. So
I hope that changes.
it will change. I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it seems like a Sunday morning thing. You know, I also have a Matzo Brei granola, and so kind of good go-to breakfasts, you know, during Passover for me are kind of like this Matzo Brei granola with some yogurt. Maybe if it's the weekend, you know, doing something more like this. I think that the jam would be fabulous. You know, a little jam and like kind of a thicker Greek yogurt would be like really, really good. You know, any way you want to take it, but now you're kind of armed with your ratios.
So can we take a minute, and if you want to unmute and just share if you have a favorite Matzo Brei variation, go ahead and unmute and just tell the group.
One of my favorites is I like to get a really good salami and chop it in either little rectangle strips or like squares and saute it first in a pan, kind of get it golden, and then add that in. Another is I'll do lox and kind of cook it up a little bit, not just put it in raw, but some lox and feta, spinach, and sauteed onion. But I think for all of us, after this class, in your recipe binder or whatever you use, just to list, just so that it's just easy and it's right there. There are so many fun variations to this. Just if you kind of list the, you know, what Alisa did and other sweet versions all together, and then 4 or 5, you know, of the savories, and then they're just at hand and you don't have to think about it. But this was so inspiring. I've never heard a quirk. I'm so excited.
I'm excited to, excuse me for interrupting, but it's time to take your popovers out of the oven. If you've been baking along, take them out and let them cool on the cookie sheet for a couple of minutes.
Mark, will you show us what they look like?
I will.
So Mark, I just spotlighted you so we can all see.
Here we go. So these are the
gorgeous.
popovers. So they're almost like a little Yorkshire pudding thing. So you could you know, serve them with your brisket and gravy and sop up the gravy with it. And of course, we've got this wonderful orange honey butter or flavored butters that we made. And that's gonna be my go-to this morning.
Will you break one in half in front of the camera? Will you break
I sure will.
And will you show us the butter too?
Yep. Okay. So the big reveal. Nice and steamy, kind of crumbled a little bit, but you get the idea. That's half of a Matzo Brei or a hot Passover roll, and take a little bit of the butter, and
You're a little out of the screen. There you go.
there we go. And just as a way to make it look a little fancy and to remind us that it is an orange, I put a little slice of orange on the side of the bowl. Another thing, and I think Pam may have mentioned this, but you can use a melon baller and make little balls of butter to serve.
What about, Mark, what about freezing these popovers if we want to save them for next week?
Absolutely. Mine are going to go in the freezer and they're going to be on the table for our Seder. So good point, Amy. Good point.
Are you going to wrap them separately or put them all in a Ziploc bag when they cool? Or how are
all
you?
in a Ziploc bag when they cool.
And then when you serve them, will you put them in the oven first to warm them up, or are you going to just room
I just thaw them, but I do put them in the oven. I put kind of any bread thing that I'm going to serve, I like to warm it up just a little bit, even especially challah. But yeah, I'll warm it up.
Fantastic. Mark, thank you so much for sharing your wonderful family recipe for popovers. And I might pop over to your house today to try one. So save me one.
Will do. Will do.
And
No
then,
pun intended, Amy.
I know. And I'm going to flip back to Alisa and just kind of leave it open mic for a few minutes if anybody wants to talk about Matzo Brei, because we had to interrupt that. So I'm going to put Alisa back on the mode where everybody can see her.
Okay, and Mark, I did want to ask you, have you ever tried to make them bigger, or do they kind of lose their, does that become like a moisture issue? Like, can you just make them bigger and cook them longer, or is that?
I think you can. I haven't, but I don't see why you couldn't. And I don't even think you'd need to cook them much longer. You know, just that second part of the baking, instead of 30 minutes, maybe make it 35. But, but
fantastic. And then I know that like fried spam is
a golf ball.
I was going to ask you about Matzo Brei, Mark. I know that fried spam is a thing like in Hawaii. I'm picturing now like
it is. Yeah, I don't think that was a recipe I never came across, was spam and Matzo Brei.
Right?
The Jewish people that have made it to Hawaii, who are hanging on to some of these traditions, probably wouldn't be eating spam. At least the ones I know weren't.
Right. And there's no substitute for spam, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, that is a good thing. Lisa, you mentioned some of your favorite cookbooks. One of my favorite cookbooks, and one I always pull out at Passover, is called When You Live in Hawaii, You Become Creative During Passover cookbook. And it was put together by one of the synagogues there. And it's still available on Amazon if you want to check out just how to do Passover. And there's little Hawaii twists in some of the recipes.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'll check it out.
Sure.
Mark Barb in the chat box said that the orange butter is amazing. And also, you may not be able to freeze these for Passover because a lot of folks are saying that they're coming over to get a popover. So you may have to put them outside your door. I want to add before we go back to Alisa, and I know some of you may be popping off, so to speak, shortly. I want to add, please let me know, email me or Pam, if you would like to share, one of your family traditions, if you have something that you like to prepare that's Jewish, and be one of our featured chefs. We actually just committed with CRC to do this. We already have dates up through May 2022. So every month we're going to be doing this. And hopefully as we can start being together more, we can add in some little field trips and some things that we can do in person as well. But I think the Zoom classes really work well. So we can all be in our own kitchens and experiment with these things together. So don't be shy. I mean, Mark, this was his first time teaching a cooking class, and thank you so much for letting us be your first class, Mark.
Well, thank you, and it was fun, and I couldn't have done it without David and Amy. You were great. Amy helped us with some rehearsals, and thank you, Amy, for thinking all this through with Pam.
Oh, and Pam did such a wonderful job working through the recipes with everybody.
Yeah.
So
and the honey butter is wonderful. The orange honey butter is wonderful.
Well, it takes a village, and please, we can't do this without you. On both ends, we need featured chefs. We need you at home. Joining us, so
or send your ideas if there's something you want to see. Maybe you don't want to teach it, but you want to learn how to make it. So we want to hear from you.
You want to try the butter?
So
Very good.
I'm gonna pass it off to Alisa and just kind of have an open mic. If people want to stay on and talk with Alisa or Mark more about variations. Alisa, is there anything else you want to make sure you add before we go to the open mic time?
No, I just want people to feel empowered, you know, to kind of do their thing, that can't mess this up. Give some consideration to the fat in the pan, to the amount of moisture, but basically just have fun with it.